Welcome to the Trenches Talk podcast today, guys, and we have a very, very special guest. I'm going to introduce Larry Sher, or Lawrence Sher. Welcome, Larry.
Yeah, you call me Larry for sure. And hey, it's great to be here with the Trenches. I'm excited.
Thank you.
I'm a big fan of the show, fan of what you guys do, your vibe and everything. So I was coming through London and thought I'd stop by.
Wicked. Well, yeah, no, I really appreciate you taking your time out to come through, say hello, and then hopefully drop some absolute gems today. But yeah, just to get this all started and kicked off, for the people who don't know who you are, just give us a little rundown into who you are and what you do.
You got it. So yeah, I'm Larry Sher. I'm a cinematographer. I've directed some, but mostly a cinematographer. And I'm from New Jersey. And I've been doing this my whole life. This is all I've done. I was a camera assistant for about 7 or 8 years before I started shooting full time. And mostly I shoot movies. I've shot films like Joker recently, and Hangover Series, and Garden State, and Black Adam, and Godzilla, King of Monsters, and a bunch of other things in between, I guess. And directed a film called Father Figures, which bombed spectacularly, but it was great. And some TV.
Hey, we all need those, don't we?
It's all right. It was a great experience, and I'm going to do it again soon, hopefully. But and just finished this new Joker film, which is a follow-up to the one we did 4 years ago.
Wicked. And can you say when that's coming out?
It comes out October of next year. I know, it's crazy. It will probably be done. I'll probably be done color timing it October of this year. So crazy enough, it'll be done and then sit there for a year. Mm-hmm. It's all because of crazy release date stuff.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I know. I wish it came out this year as well.
Yeah. Me too. I was like, or is that part of the process? You let it sit there like an aging wine or anything like that?
I think it's not that, except it's literally as simple as release dates and what's the best release date for this movie and where does Joaquin have Napoleon this year and then he won't have, something next year. I think some of it plays into it. I think it would be kind of a rush to get it done by this year, even though maybe the color timing will be done in the fall. I think the movie still could be sort of worked on all the way through Christmas. So I think it's one of those things. But yeah. Yes, I mean, I saw about an hour and a half of it recently, and it's awesome.
Is it?
And so it's in good shape. It wasn't what... Todd is such a spectacular editor as well as a filmmaker that for me, he's not one to I have 2 years now, I can edit it for a year and a half. No, he just powers through as if the movie needs to be finished in a timely fashion. So
sometimes that's the best way.
He's great like that. Yeah, he's ruthless when it gets in the editing room.
Wicked. So, kind of just giving a bit of a kind of backstory to your journey and career. How did you start off? What was that first interest in film?
The first interest, I think, came through photography a bit, and it came in the form of my dad was a doctor. He's retired now, but was always and still is a huge photography fan. He was really into nature photography, but shooting birds or shooting macro. We had tarantulas and bugs and shit in my house, and he would have macro photography, and he would take these he was a real nerd in terms of computers and photography, and then he was also a pathologist to make a living. And he lent me a camera for a school trip once, and that got me interested in photography. And I was playing baseball and broke my nose and couldn't play for a couple weeks, and I started taking pictures from the dugout. And they got in the newspaper, and that was sort of an early stage interest in photography. And then at university, I was an economics major and graduated as an economics major. But during school, I sort of fell back in love with film through a film class, and then got really interested and realized, 100%, I wanted to do something creative, and photography was a natural place within movies. So I started helping friends as a cinematographer, moved to LA, didn't know anybody, started working as a camera assistant and on a lot of music videos for directors like Francis Lawrence when they just were graduating from college. and his classmate Jeff Cutter, who was then his DP, and I was his assistant, and we would do a lot of rap music videos and R&B and whatever came our way, and that was kind of my beginning stages of as a camera assistant, but also as like a budding cinematographer.
So did you go to college or university specifically for film?
No, never, nothing. Self-taught.
Self-taught,
exactly.
eh?
Well, yeah, because when I came out to LA, I had the basis of knowledge I had was a little bit of photography, and I took a couple film classes at university. But I really, at that point, was like, oh, education is... I sort of finally understood what education really meant, because I carried that camera around, that same still camera my dad lent me. I still have it today. I have it with me even for this trip. It's an old Nikon F film camera. Took the meter out of it, so it had no meter, and I would just go around and start to like teach myself photography with the idea that obviously motion picture photography is just 24 frames per second stills, and I would just take pictures of everything, bracket them, teach myself what I liked underexposure-wise. A lot of it was just reactionary photography, so it wasn't like I was lighting things. I was just going to places and looking at things I liked and learning my own aesthetic, and then just trying to get my hands on shooting. And then a friend of mine and we made a film right out of college, which was, for all intents and purposes, my film school. And so about a year out of college, we wrote together and produced, and he was the director and the star, and I was the cinematographer, and I was also the truck driver who went to pick up the equipment from Detroit, and
very rudimentary.
Also, yeah, all of it. And we made a film called Captain Jack, and that was basically a full-length feature, which we went all the way through distributing it and finding a distributor and selling it and all that. And that was soup to nuts, like my film school. And then I went right back to camera assisting until I could start to become like a full-time DP.
Sure. And like, what was it within film? Because you, by the sounds of it, you could have been a photographer, and like, but what was it in the moving picture side that you kind of resonated with?
Just movies. How powerful movies were.
Yeah.
It's why, almost exclusively in my career, I've shot movies. I've shot a little bit of television, some pilots, very few music videos and commercials, really to speak of. I just love the power of movies. I think because I wasn't one of those kids who made movies as a kid, but I would watch movies because they're so amazing. And most of them were populist films. It wasn't like I was an art house kid. Jaws, E.T., Close Encounters, Rocky. These were the films that sort of moved me. And so it wasn't until maybe when I got interested in film at university that I started watching movies as an art form, Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, Being There, those kind of films, and started seeing it as an art form, and then got really into it, through my younger 20s, basically. But yeah, I loved the idea of telling a story and going to a movie theater and seeing it big with a bunch of other people. And I still do. It's still the greatest joy is seeing a movie, even something I've worked on. Yeah, I don't really know what the movie is until I see it in a theater with, 400 or 500 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's that moment like when, I suppose, because you obviously you don't edit, and so
yeah,
you don't really know how it's obviously going to be played out, and how, like, what is that feeling like when people either stand up or clap or laugh or...
Well, I remember like very specifically with Joker, because the movie was trying, and it was joyous, and it was challenging, and it was all the things. It was all the roller coasters that making movies are, right? And I wasn't 100% sure that it was going to work entirely, because you never really know. I knew what we did, and I knew while we were making it, I was very proud of what we were doing, but it was also one of those movies that I learned, and I've always, seen with Todd Phillips, who I've now made 7 or 8 films with, is it's a fluid experience, right? You're making it, and it's changing as you're making it every day, right? And So I'd seen the film, and I'd seen an early cut, and I'd given Todd some notes, and then I walked away from it because I don't really sit with the film with Todd at all and let him do his thing. So I'm able to release myself from the movie and have a little objectivity, even though I was a part of every day of shooting it. And I remember it wasn't until Todd's like, hey, we're now done. We haven't timed it yet, but I have to show it to Warner Brothers. And I'm going to show it to Warner Brothers with their international distributors. So basically it was like all the international distributors at Warner Brothers in Burbank. It's like, so it was about 400 people in the biggest theater they have, which is one of the biggest screens in all of LA.
Mm.
And I brought my wife, and I remember just turning to her about like 45 minutes in and going, is this amazing? Like, because I think it's amazing. And she goes, it's amazing. And I'm like, because I'm sitting there going, I feel like this is amazing. And just like having this feeling like this is better than I even hoped it would be in terms of like when it was all finished, completed. I was obviously knew the movie at that point was going to work, but seeing it fully formed, music, power of the cinema, the size of the screen, I thought, oh man, this could be actually something really special.
Mm.
And that is crazy. And by the way, it's also crazy when you're like, shit, this movie's not working.
yeah.
Because it's also, you see that in the theater too, you know? And so all of it is fun, but the power of it that big, I think, is something special.
I mean, you must have had an inkling that it was gonna be good.
I had an inkling while we were making it that it was going to be spectacular. But then you go through days in which you're like, maybe we're fucking this all up, you know? There's a process of making Joker, which I've now come to appreciate more than anything, which is, and Todd would always describe it as jazz. You know, he'd say like filmmaking is not math, it's not science, it's jazz. We're sort of changing, and and now it's like my whole philosophy of making movies is this jazz philosophy. So now I really embrace it and love it. And I've also recognized that part of the process of everything changing, which also makes you feel a little, unmoored and a little bit unstable, and feeling like, well, and now I don't know if what we're doing is great. Like piece by piece might be great. Like you finish a day, you go, that scene's fantastic. That scene's great. Oh, I really liked what we did there. That was a cool frame, whatever it is. But then you still are sort of like, will it work as a whole? Will it work for an audience that is not involved in it, right? Like even though me and my gaffer and my assistants and my team, we all might be like, we knocked it out of the park today, it still might not work. So, you know, what's often left with me, and it's happened even over the last, month or so since we finished this new Joker film, is, I'm left with that anxiety, like literally sleepless anxiety of like, shit, did I make those choices well? Are those the wrong choices? Like truly spinning around in my head while I sleep, because all I have is kind of the post-mortem of finishing something,
Yeah,
so
for
I'm
sure.
not always sure.
Yeah, I mean, I still get that whenever I shoot on film. I'm like, oh, what if it was, what if the film's dead, or like, and it's just totally out of your control, and you get that and you think, fuck, like,
Yeah.
that's a lot of money. Well, a lot of money, respectively, that a brand has put into shooting on film, and I've been pushing for film as well, but then you go, cool. To my knowledge, everything is good, but then you're laying in bed and you're like, fuck, what if?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest challenge of filmmaking is there's never one choice that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
And so I usually never struggle on the day of making a choice, ever. Like, I'll think about it. The prep process can be the most anxiety-ridden because I'm making every choice possible every day. I'm thinking about every opportunity and every choice. Should this be handheld? Should this be long lens? Should this be moving? Should this not be moving? Whatever those choices are, I'm running them all through my head all day long. But the process of a 10-hour day or 12-hour day or wherever you're working under, the decisions to make in that moment are usually very easy for me to make. But afterwards, I can still go, wait, shit, was that the right decision? And that's what you get to live with, and you can't change at that point. And that's usually the tricky part is the what if is, should we have done that? Or did I move the camera too much? Should I just stop? Whatever that is.
I guess that's kind of good to know and comforting for the rest of us out there that Larry Sher still thinks like that. But yeah, surely when you come on set, surely most of those decisions are already made for you, right? Like you in the prep work, the way your mind is thinking within that moment, so you can answer those questions very quickly.
Yeah, mostly it's done in the form of lighting and the set, because I'm definitely prepared for everything to change on the day, right? And this is probably more, at least my philosophy, even if it's not a film with Todd, who we do that quite a lot, but every movie, I'm always thinking, I'm prepared for the director to say, I want to change everything, right? I've learned over time that it's not only their prerogative, but it also might be the best thing for the movie and for the scene, is to say this isn't working. And so I'm thinking in my head, what if all of the planning goes out the window? What's plan B? What's plan C? What's plan D? So everything I do in pre-production is to try to accommodate for those situations, right? So it may just be I'll talk to my gaffer and my key grip and my whole team, and I'll say, okay, all right, how are we lighting this? What if that doesn't work? What if we want to change all these things? So then it comes in the form, and some of this is rich people problems, right? And I have the benefit of working on some movies that have some budget. So it may come in the form of let's put everything on something that can move. Let's put everything on a dimmer board, all those kind of things, right? Because then we can make changes really, really quickly without having to upend the whole schedule and set the movie off target and all that stuff. Nobody wants that. So for us, it's we try to come in with that philosophy of if the director says we've changed everything, nobody panics, and in fact we embrace it. You've come to sort of get into this mentality of the next thing we do may be nothing we planned, but it might even be better. And so you start to embrace those opportunities and really look forward to them and say, okay, we're going to relight this, but we have the tools, so that's all right. We can do it fairly quickly. But now maybe something will come out of this kind of, pressure makes diamond situation, right? It's this pressure of let's come up with something new. And this would happen all the time and in exciting ways, certainly on the last Joker film that we just finished, where the new thing was even better. And Todd and I, we would talk about this all the time, where we would make a change that was fundamentally different. And it was so much better for the movie. And then we would afterwards go, what if we didn't make that change? We would have done something worse. And then we start to be oh my God, thank God we made that change, even if it was something completely unplanned and off the path that we were on. I don't even know if that answered the question.
No, that's cool. It's good. Yeah, it's good to know, because I resonate with that and agree with that, because you get yourself into a situation where you've planned for it, but you don't actually know what the hell is going to go on in that moment. In my world, usually the artist is very late, and so then you've got to think on your feet and change up, potentially the concept. What was there a moment where you really had to kind of grasp that concept of being so adaptable on set?
Well, there was a moment on a movie which taught me to make sure that with all the planning I do, I also am really present to something that I didn't look out for, right? And it was this movie I did called Paul. It was Nick Frost and Simon Pegg, and they're two nerds, traveling around, and it's it was Greg Mottola directed, and it's really fun and great, and it's a CG alien voiced by Seth Rogen. And there's a scene we did at the end of the movie where they're up on top of a mountain, in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Huge softbox, one of the biggest sets I've ever had to do, all night exterior. And there's a lot of planning that goes on there. And I remember that was one of those movies where we had to plan everything because there was so many shots, limited time. And we had planned all these shots and storyboarded and do all the things you're going to do. And the prop master during a shot came to me and he said, "Hey, listen, I've been watching it from over here. You got to take a look at this shot." And I looked at it and I was like, "Oh my God, this is my favorite shot in the movie." And I quickly was like, "Take a camera and let's put a camera here." And it was like he taught me, one, listen to everybody on set, because somebody might be watching the scene from a perspective you've never seen. And it's a perspective you should be seeing, because you're already focused on the shots you've planned. So it started making me think, like, first of all, walk the set, have your plan, but take one more look at other perspectives before you start to, like, say, okay, we've got this scene, because you might just be looking, everyone, you have your own paradigm, right? Like, oh, I always am going to look at it from the shadow side or whatever it is. And you say, well, what does the front lit side look like, right? I'm so anti-shooting on the front lit side of the camera. Sometimes the director will force you into that, right? And you go, well, blah, blah, and you're like, wait. Before I just flatly, argue with the director on why we shouldn't be on the front lit side, let me look at it there, or let me embrace that and see what that looks like. And maybe it's some new, perspective on. There's a shot that I hope will end up in Joker that's 100% on the front lit side.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. It's like one of my favorite lighting in the whole movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like something normally I wouldn't embrace, but I remember knowing, like, well, this is the only really place we could shoot this from, and then figure out, well, how can we make it look interesting?
Right, it doesn't look too flat.
I found a way to just cut it in a way that I kind of love it. It's like one of my favorite frames, At least in the cut I saw so far, it's in there. So we'll see.
And so, yeah, since kind of chatting about the Joker, I've got some questions about that film. Obviously, the Joker was such a different film to what you and Todd had worked on previously. It was a much more sinister kind of narrative. What was that like, going from the comedies like The Hangover to then shooting such a sinister narrative and with the Joker?
Yeah.
And like, what were the nuances kind of around?
Yeah, it's interesting because you're not alone in sort of looking at that as sort of a departure in a way of like what Todd and I had done before. But in a way, the movie's exactly the same. And it's a progression of all the films we've done up into that moment. And same with Todd, right? First of all, like some of the darkness, some of the sinisterness, some of the sort of macabre aspects of it are all part of every movie. Like if you even look at the Hangover to Hangover 2 to Hangover 3, they go in the direction that's more that. Now, they may have more sort of specific comedy things, but, even Joaquin in the making of those films, we laugh a lot more than the material will let you to believe. Like, in our way, we're making a movie that feels just like every other movie we've made. The only thing fundamentally different is because we're not servicing jokes and because we're not servicing, quote unquote, a comedy, we have more moments to be just more internal with the character and make it more of a character study. And because, let's say, for a film like Joker, where a lot of it is just Arthur by himself, I think it allows those kind of more artistic imagery and artistic moments and photography to sort of shine through, even though they're probably in some of our other work. Even some of the color palette stuff is in early Hangover stuff. It's in War Dogs. It's in, it's all stuff we've been playing with and progressing naturally to that place that when the making of it never felt like making anything different for Todd and I. It wasn't like suddenly, we're making a real movie. Mm-hmm. We still think like Due Dates are a real movie, and that was like, right after Hangover. So for us, it was just obviously working with somebody. Well, I mean, we've worked with spectacular actors before, Bradley Cooper and Downey and all these other amazing actors. So Joaquin was somebody we admired, greatly, and we recognized him as being one of the best in the world. And I think early days, there was maybe a little sense of like, okay, we have to step up our game. But the actual making of it day to day felt exactly the same. It's the same as like my first day on a movie set when I was like 28, you know, having my first opportunity to shoot a feature feels exactly the same as like making this newest Joker. They're exactly the same. Like nothing fundamentally feels different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the space in which the movie's made might be different, and like the expectations and maybe the spotlight that's on the film, but the actual practical making of the films, they feel always the same. And that's actually really comforting, because, you know, the other stuff can force some anxiety into the process, you know, the expectations and your own expectations, or, you know, certainly making a sequel to a popular film, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And so obviously like, the color palette within the Joker is quite iconic, and it's, for such a sinister film, the colors are very vivid and bright and saturated. Do you mind like talking on that a little bit, and why you chose to kind of put colors in certain places?
Yeah.
And use such, you know, rich tones within that?
I just have always liked color. Always. I've never been somebody who has like desaturated things. And I've noticed it. I've recognized it, like inherently a film look, or like a movie, particularly like modern movies, are slightly desaturated. I see it now all the time. I see it in everyone else's work. And I never bothers me. But when my own work, I'm always like, I like color. So in talking and thinking about just making something like Joker, to me, the philosophy was more, what does film inherently do? Even though we shot digitally, but we started out shooting film. So for me, I'm like, what is the thing that I always appreciate about film? And I appreciate, you know, in photographers and cinematographers that I like, is that mixed light feel that happens just naturally, right? So if we're inside of an interior and we don't correct, you know, we half correct for the sunlight, well, then that sunlight's going to be blue out the windows. And I'll see that in movies, you know, from the 70s and the 80s that I really like. And it'll mix with the practicals inside, which are really warm tungsten. And then those uncorrected fluorescents will be blue cyan. And then the other fluorescents will be, you know, warm white, and they'll be yellowy green. And that sort of combination of those colors have always interested me. So that was the philosophy. That was it. It was just like, what's naturalism within this world? So work the lighting from the natural places they are, right? From the fluorescents, or from the windows, or from the practicals. And then embrace all that mixed light that would come if you were shooting this movie in 1970 or 1980, right? And that's fundamentally where the color palette comes from. It comes from the reality of, like, if you go back to those movies that I appreciated when I was young, or when I was like learning cinematography, you see that, right? Taxi Driver's an obvious example, right? It's like all that mixed light that's in the movie is not because they're making these lighting choices. It's because those fluorescents had massive green spike in them, and they wouldn't change them out. They would go into an environment, in a diner or wherever it was, and that would be the way that the film stock would register it. And so now we can't, nothing registers that. Mm-hmm. So you have to now add blue and add green and add those sort of things. But that was the idea, was to make it feel like it was a movie that was shot in 1979 or 80 or something like that.
It definitely puts its stamp on the film, because you got, like, you know, the new Batman film, which is super dark and super desaturated. And so it's nice to see that, you know, that was a, you know, specific choice and specific look to kind of go after.
Yeah, and I love the new Batman. I mean, I think that's fantastic
for sure.
It's just like, if I had made the movie, it would just be slightly different choices.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. My girlfriend was like, "Can you see it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I love it." I was like,
I'm one of those people, though. It's funny because Todd and I, we would have arguments on even the first Joker, and he would be like, "It's too fucking dark," and I'm "It's not dark enough." And he's like, and so we stand on the like we would never be in a place to put it into that really, really dark place, because we're fighting with each other over something that puts it into a mid-ground that is never going to be, at risk of being as dark as some films. Yeah, I don't think we both would do it,
It's a risk, isn't it? It's a risk.
It to me, it's more of like we would never put ourselves into that place unless it was a scene that we knew we had to put it right there, But yeah, it's like we would have a lot of arguments on the first one.
I guess that's just something you kind of learn over time. Were there many arguments on the second one?
No, we had a really, yeah. And the first one was more, I think, because, what we've grown to see is, and this is what was also really enjoyable in making the second one, was it was now a second opportunity to work with Joaquin. And Todd, it's also something I admire greatly about him, is he fundamentally recognizes that, like, he could write a script, right? And he wrote an amazing one with Scott Silver, same as the second one too. But the participant of the actor is also the other screenwriter. And he's never one of those guys that's like, goes, well, these are the words, Sam is this. No, it's always a collaborative process of like, this is all, and Joaquin, because not only is he the Joker, I mean, he is Arthur Fleck, he is this character, he's fundamental to the success of the movie. The movie doesn't exist without him. As Todd used to say, it's like he's our special effects, right? He's like, we don't have any special effects in the movie. He's the guy. And so you're embracing a person who also wants to experiment and try things and all that. So on the first one, I think Todd was navigating what that is and embracing it, but also, it's changing every day. So for both of us, like that philosophy of trying things and changing things and upending every plan that we had at times could be a little unnerving. This one wasn't, because we knew that was part of the plan. So I had some new crew members, and I would say to them, listen, we are going to plan everything. And I'm going to tell you right now, there will be days where everything changes. And by day 2 or 3 or 4, they saw that, and then they fucking loved it. And it was like, and by the end of the movie, they were like, this was one of the best experiences we've had making a movie, because everything changed every day. And they were like, this is so exciting and fun, because we had planned enough that it was never like the movie went out of schedule or nothing. It was the opposite. We all were sort of on board with this. So it became a brand new way of making a movie, I think, for so many people, that I think the way it was in a way more enjoyable than the first one was because it was a known element. It was like we knew what we were getting into.
That's amazing. That's
and it was
really
so
cool.
fun. Yeah. And I think for somebody like Stephanie, for Lady Gaga, she also, then got into now, this is how it is. And it's also really, it also allows opportunities for them to experiment and try things and do all this stuff. So nothing felt fixed in stone.
That's great, because when you just get a group of kind of like-minded creative people together and give them a space to be like, look, this is what we think, but go out, do your thing, kind of mix with each other, try new things. I think that's where the gold moments kind of lay within each project. I mean, it's similar to me on music videos. You go in with one plan, come out with another, and then be like, all right, cool, that actually went much better than I thought.
Like what would be an example? Because I remember back in the music video days, there was always a moment in which you were like, you needed to do like one performance from top to bottom, because they were always so hectic.
Yeah.
And then you're like, or at least we have something that we could cut the whole.
Yeah.
Sometimes
safety.
you're doing parts. Yeah, you're like, okay, we have the close up of them performing. This was like the old school way. And like, okay, at least we have her going all the way through the song, and we can, we have a video now. But like, but yes, like you said before, where you suddenly go, oh, we had 20 shots planned, but now what's the fewest? And it's like, name that tune. What's the fewest number of shots we could do to still execute this video? Like what would be a good example for you where you had to sort of trim it way back and it was all for the better?
I think, to be fair, I did a music video at the start of the year, actually in Paris, which is really cool. But we had we were in like a studio, and we had like a 360 track around a mirror, and so obviously that made it quite tricky.
You're keeping yourself out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I didn't keep myself out, but you know, with like kind of sticking our heads together, we wanted to get this shot from like all different angles, but instead we wanted to get these cool, interesting Dutchy angles, but instead we just did one track around, and it worked so much better than cutting between all these like cool angles, because I mean, we kind of did it so you can kind of match cut it anyway, and so there were some cuts in there, but just by having the one shot, it was so clean. It was very like art house, you know, stuff you'd see in like an art gallery. And then the VFX guy called Lee,
he took you out.
He took me out. So thanks Lee. Yeah, he did a job. He did a job.
That's the problem, is like, it is a little bit of, now having worked on movies that have a different size budget, I've become a little bit like, you can just paint me out, right? Can you just paint that light out? I've now become like, well, you just paint that out, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's a little bit of like, I could basically,
get away with anything.
Yeah, I got to put a light in the shot. You just paint it out.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not at that stage, although I was for that video, but I'm pretty sure like he worked overtime for that. But yeah, it's crazy that we're now at a stage where you think you can kind of just paint it out. It's all good.
But now with like Photoshop generative fill, I'm like, aren't we there yet in movies?
In movies,
like, now when you just see the generative fill, I'm like, wait a second, can we do anything now? You can't tell me. Why do I even need green screen anymore?
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I try not to rely on that and rest on the laurels too much, because it's
it's a bit of a crutch.
Yeah, isn't it?
No, for sure.
To be fair, going back to the Joker, you say working with like Joaquin and Stephanie, kind of what is your approach when you work with actors? Do you like befriend them, give them critique?
Yeah, it's interesting. I try not to. I think my general philosophy is to sort of give them as much space as they want.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I'm trying to either be rude or standoffish, or I try not to like jump in and try to be their friend.
Mm-hmm.
I try to give, like, the first film with Joaquin, I was like, I'm going to give this guy whatever space he needs. Like, I'm going to obviously say, I'm here for you. If you need anything, you have any questions, I'm here for you. I'm there. But I try to be like almost like invisible to them as best as I can. And it's interesting because with him, I remember early on, he was like 100% in character all the time. And like day 2, he sort of quietly came to me and he said, I'm sorry for being whatever, like weird. I just need to stay. And I was like, oh, geez, please don't even stop apologizing. Just do your thing. Like, don't worry about it all. And I remember I didn't know Stephanie at all. And strangely, I felt like I never really even met her, even during the makeup hair test. Because again, maybe it was my philosophy of not trying to sort of get in their space. Mm. And then I remember for like a week being like, God, I feel like we're like disconnecting, not even connecting. We're like on opposites. And I would say to like my crew, like, Jesus, I can't like crack it. I feel like she either hates me or we hate each other, or there's something weird going on here. And I barely said anything except I would say like, Stephanie, here you can, this is where this is where your second team was, or whatever it was, like minor little things. And then the AD at one point said, oh, Steph would like if you just called her Lee on set. And I was like, 100%. And then I literally said, like, the next thing I said was something Lee, and it was like everything changed.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it was like, from that point on, it was like our whole connection changed. And I was like, well, all right, cool. That's all I needed to know. And that changed everything. And then obviously then we made the rest of the movie, and it was like much more of a connection that just grew over this point of the movie. By the end, I think we felt connected in the sense of like we've done this thing together that was joyous and fulfilling. But generally speaking, yeah, I try to give them space. I don't know. I don't want anything technical to ever feel like it's being in the way. I don't like their marks to be had. I don't like there ever be marks. I don't like for them to be aware of the camera. If there's like a technical thing with focus, I can't stand it. Only because I just don't want that to ever be part of the process for them, that they're worried about focus or changing their movement or worrying about missing a mark or any of that stuff. I just want it to be an invisible part of the process to them.
And well, I suppose in a sense, it's just not you getting in their way, not making anything longer, not
like
complicating things too much.
Or like, God, they just did an incredible thing and it somehow got fucked up because of something technical. Or we create a shot that's so complicated that suddenly, you know, that's the thing that the scene is about, you know, as opposed to like the performance.
Yeah.
So even if there's something complex, I'm always hoping that it's so easy for them to execute that then it suddenly doesn't feel complex anymore. If it fails like the first 2 times, then usually we'll bail on it.
Sure.
So if it's a technical thing that I hope I'm always like, Jesus, I hope it works early. Because if it doesn't, then we'll just bail.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because it's not like, certainly on that film, it's not something we would chase generally because it would suddenly become about the technique and it wouldn't become about the acting anymore.
Yeah, for sure. I think like, do you know the probe lens?
Yeah, yeah.
That takes a lot of finessing.
Oh my God, yes.
And it's whenever that gets on a job and a client throws it in, I mean, like you have half an hour to get all these nice probe shots of food and you're like,
this is not a half an hour. This is nothing. Anything macro. By the way, macro in its nature, even just an insert on a movie is never fast.
No.
I'm like, guys, let's do this as like a separate crew in a different day.
Heard it here first.
Yeah, because I'm like, this is probably the most complicated thing we'll do all day, right? Even just like you say, either it's a product shot or something specific. First of all, the focus alone on a probe lens is really, really hard, right? And everything moving, you know, the nature of it is to do a moving shot, you know, on a probe, and it's just complex. And if you can't rush through it, if you want it to be good,
you need to finesse it.
Yeah, no.
Have a whole specific day.
100%. There's never like, let's do it quickly, and let's not do it as the last shot because then we're going into overtime, guaranteed.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so, to be fair, that was a bit of a side tangent. Sorry,
Well, no, we want to teach the world.
Yeah.
Very proper time for the product
The probe lens.
Yeah,
for sure.
Okay.
So obviously, from the Joker, you got nominated for an Oscar. How did that feel?
You know, genuinely, it was amazing. Like, so it's just filled with such joy. I had sort of, in a way, you know, I grew up loving the Oscars. I still love it. I still celebrate it like it's like my Super Bowl day, you know. I like always have a party and I always watch it. I'm not cynical about it at all.
Okay.
At all. I can't be cynical about it. I genuinely like it. And it's not because of the award aspect or like, it's like every part of that experience of being nominated. I mean, the best one was frankly the BAFTAs. That was the best experience of the whole thing. I'd never been to London, and then going to like Kensington Palace was like, and having my wife there, and like everything, like, you know, the ceremony, like the 2 or 3 events that surrounded it, coming to London, you know. Camera image, which we won for Joker, and even the other, everything else, every little thing leading up to the Oscars. And the Oscars for me was like, I'm gonna be completely non-cynical about it. I had my brothers there with their family. I had like my son came and my nieces came, and it was like, I probably asked for more tickets for that. And by the way, when you ask for them, you still pay for them. It was thousands of dollars. But I was like, I'm going to do this like, might never happen again, right? I never thought it would happen anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to be non-cynical, and I'm going to embrace it like embarrassingly so. Like, I had more people there than anybody. Like, I think I had 11 people there. I brought my camera assistant who had been with me forever, Julie Donovan. She was like my rock for every part of like my early days, all the way through, you know, War Dogs. So like, you know, all the way through the career. She came to the Oscars. I'm like, I'm bringing everybody.
Yeah.
Like, I was just, everything about it was joyous, everything. Because I think in my mind, I was like, this is the kind of DP I am. I'm like, I'm going to be a DP who will service the director beyond all things, beyond the photography. I'll never be somebody who like, they're like, we need this shot and we need 10 minutes to get this shot. I'm like, we're getting this shot 10 minutes. I'm like, even if the photography was sacrificed. So I'm like, my imagery is never precious enough for me to ever be nominated for an Academy Award.
Sure.
So it was like never a consideration. It was never a consideration. And I was like, we're going to make Joker. And I said to Todd, not jokingly, but a little bit like, because he had written such an incredible script, I said to Todd, I go, after he'd sent me it, and we said, all right, we had three things. I was like, all right, let's shoot on film. Yeah. Let's shoot 185, yeah. And then I go, and listen, if we're going to do this, it's not even going to be a success unless we get nominated for 10 Academy Awards. And he's like, yeah, well, let's not fucking worry about that. And I said that jokingly, and then it did. You know, I think he got 11 nominations or something. But I said it more as like, not because that was what our aspiration was, but I'm like, let's make this the best possible film we could ever make, and let's make something that hopefully stands the test of time.
That's quite a moment, isn't it? Was that the pinnacle?
Well,
Is there a pinnacle?
No, I don't think so. I mean, to me, it's the journey, because I've made so many films that it's the journey is all you can control, and the destination is out of your hands, right? So honestly, it wasn't even something I dreamt about, because there was never a film I had done that was ever going to be considered for that. And so, you know, when it started happening, like when it won Venice, we were like, okay, we made a film that won Venice. And I think for Todd, it was like, wow, that's cool. Like, okay, you know, here's the guy who made Old School and The Hangover, and he's not winning Venice, you know? And so it's like, I think even for, you know, sure, for Todd, even still, it was like, all right. And Todd's a remarkable filmmaker, and when it's all said and done, he's deserving of like way more accolades than he ever is, you know, will receive. He's a real filmmaker, even before Joker. And so, but for me, like I said, the best way I could describe it was I tried not to be cynical, because it's so easy to be cynical about this kind of stuff, or to be like nonplussed, or a little bit like, or to go, this is bullshit, doesn't matter. I don't know. I stayed up, and I stayed up to watch the BAFTA nominations come in. I mean, I think I was accidentally up because it was like 1 a.m. and I was like, oh shit. I saw something. It was like, the BAFTAs are being announced in like an hour or so. And I remember watching those come through, because that was before the Oscars. Mm-hmm. And when those came through and I saw Todd was nominated, and, you know, it was like everybody from the movie, I was like, fuck. And I remember texting him like, motherfucker, we just got nominated for like 12 BAFTAs. And I was like, this shit's really happening now. Like, this Oscar thing might actually happen, you know? Yeah, I was like a goofball about it. I stayed up. I woke up early for the Oscar nominations. Like, I was that guy, because I was like, why not? Like, this is potentially happening in a way that I'm going to just be really joyful about all of it. And so in that regard, the whole experience was great. Yeah. I had nothing but joy for the entire sort of that whole season. And then, you know, it ended, and 2 weeks later it was like COVID.
Yeah.
And then the world changed.
Back to reality.
In a real way.
When you first started out on this journey, was that ever in your sights to be?
It honestly was only in the sights as, like I said, I was such a fan of the Oscars that I think you don't go into making movies and maybe not have that dream.
Sure.
Yeah. But I think because I wasn't making films that were sort of in the ballpark for being nominated, it wasn't really something that either I was dreaming of realistically or even upset that it wasn't part of the plan. I was like, no, I was happy with just being able to make my living working as a DP and getting opportunities and you know, I just thought, oh, I'll start directing and then, you know, maybe that's where it'll happen. Who knows? Maybe that's where my genius will be shown.
Yeah, it's untapped.
Exactly, untapped.
And kind of maybe looking at your career as a whole, when did you feel the biggest change happened?
Well, I think here's what I learned mostly was, and again, you can control the journey, but the destination's really hard, is the films you make will sometimes provide you opportunities and give you more stability in your career, and you have no control over what those films are. And I think The Hangover, because it was such a big success, at least it made me realize now I'm in a position where I can say no to some things, and where maybe the anxiety of like, will I be able to earn a living, will start to go away a little bit. It'll change because then I want to now start, you know, maybe controlling the career a little bit. So you're still going to choose to say no, but every time you say no, you're also anxious, like, okay, where's the yes going to come? And did I just say no to the one opportunity I have for the next 4 months, right? So that's fraught with its own anxiety, but at least you know that maybe some more opportunities are coming, because it's probably less about the work than it is about the movie, right? And that's the part that's hard, and that's the part that's unfair. So when you make something super successful, producers are no different than anyone else. They want sort of to put people in place that they think bring levels of success and opportunity for success for the film. So if you make a movie that's successful, it gives you opportunities over people that are more talented than you. And that I learned because there are people like Jeff Cutter, who is fucking incredible DP and who I grew up working with for so many years. And I'm like, he deserves way more opportunities. The Hangover provided me opportunities ahead of him, and not because I was a better DP, you know, at all. Like, he's a damn good DP. And has an incredible career already in commercials and music videos with great directors. But it's like, what's that director opportunity that's going to give him to like have, you know, to shine in a way, right? And and that's the part you can't control, and that's where The Hangover actually was probably the one film that made me go, okay, this helped, you know, you know, give me a little more stability in my career.
Sure. And how did your relationship with Todd come about? Like, how was it? Were you both? Was it early on in your careers, or was it more just a?
He had already made Old School, which to me was one of the best comedies out there. You know, and Old School was maybe 3 or 4 years before Hangover, and so I mean, he'd already done 2 films after Old School. So he was an established director and decently successful. So I was coming into his world, probably he had more success than me at that time. You know, I had done Garden State, which had some indie cred. I had done a couple studio films like Dukes of Hazzard. So at least it gave him enough that he could hire me without getting too much, you know, like, you know, because that happens a lot where the studio's like, well, this guy doesn't have enough credits to, you know, come in and do that. But I felt like he was more successful and I was coming into his brand, you know. So that opportunity came simply because I was recommended by a friend.
Wow.
Yeah. And he said, well, Todd's looking for a DP and, you know, you want to interview with him. And we got on. But he had a DP who was deciding maybe he was going to do some commercials instead and direct commercials and stuff. So that DP basically said no, which allowed me the opportunity to shoot The Hangover.
Is Hollywood just based off of recommendations?
I think the whole industry is based on recommendations, but I also think that is comforting, because it means that, like, again, I always say to people, attitude, enthusiasm are way more important than skill. right? It's like the skill matters, and you have to have at least an aesthetic and an eye and be good. And if you're really, really good, you could be a fucking asshole, but you have to be like top 0.001% to be that good, right? But generally speaking, most people are somewhere, else, right? They're not 0.001. And so if you're somebody they want to hang around with and be in the trenches with for, a week, 2 weeks, a month, a year, a day, right? That's what they're looking for, is like, who are they going to just want to be in the trenches fighting alongside with? And that's going to make a big difference, right? And so, are you going to get on with them is kind of like as important as anything. And I think that's generally the thing that's going to carry the weight. And so, whether you're a PA or whether you're anybody who's starting out, the work's going to get you more work, right? And so it's why if you work with a director and you guys get on, then that director and you are going to continue to work together, and that's also going to give you more work.
Is that what got you into Hollywood, being a nice guy?
Well, I don't know. Trust me, I've been a screamer. I've been a jerk at times, so I'm not always a nice guy. But I always worked my ass off for the director.
Sure.
Like, I've screamed at fucking producers before, more than once. Like, I'm actually probably damaged my career on the producer side. I'm like a soldier.
Sure.
Like, I'm like truly a soldier for that director. And I've like screamed at the producers because I'm like, I'm going to scream at you because the director can't scream at you. And I honestly, I go into like blind rage of like forgetting that like they're the person who can hire me, but also can say to somebody, this guy's a real fucking asshole.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do it always for the benefit of the movie. And that's my rationalization. But I've like said, like get off the fucking set because we're making a movie right now, and stop showing up at lunch acting like you've been here since breakfast, and understand why we're behind. Like, stay here from breakfast to learn. Don't show up 10 minutes before lunch and ask us why we're behind. So I'm not always a nice guy.
Sure.
But I'm always doing it for the benefit of the movie, right? It's never about other shit. It's always just about like, we're all in here trying to do the same thing, which is to make something good. And so as long as you're also aligned with that, then we're good. But yeah, I'm a real soldier for the director, that's for sure.
Hey, no, I respect that. I respect that. And yeah, no wonder directors want you by their side. It's like a bodyguard situation. No, I rate that.
It's hard to be a director. It's like you've got so much on your plate, and all they want is another person just who cares deeply about the project like they do, right? And is also staying up at night thinking about it, and waking up in the morning thinking about it, and I've always been that person, and genuinely, because I think, well, here's an opportunity, and every day is an opportunity to make something. So even if the day went poorly, the next day is a new day, and a new day to make something really good, make some good frames.
When you started making like the films like The Hangover, big films, like what change did you see within yourself, like when shooting them? Did you become, I don't know, like a calmer person, or a person where you feel maybe a little bit more, I don't know, entitled? Or
it probably, no. I mean, to me, the respect thing was like, they'll respect me if I'm worthy of respect, right? Like, I wasn't about seeking respect or anything like that. To me, it was about like executing whatever that was. So the jobs never felt, like, I never looked at like, oh, now I'm doing a movie that has $60 million as being any different than a movie that had $5 million. In a way, I felt like I would push harder on the $5 million movie than I would on the $60 million movie, or whatever it was like. But even there are things I look back on and I think, it's really like, what did I fight for that I thought was really important, and then get through the production? And I think every time I fought for something, and I felt like it, and let's say I won, I was always really happy that I fought for it because I thought it was for the best of the movie. There's rarely an instance where I fought for something that was just like stupid and shit and like was a waste of money, you know? And if I felt like it was a waste of money, it usually presented itself before where I could still pull the trigger and say, let's not do this, you know? But there are weird things that we did even in certain movies because I guess we had budget that even I think now and I go, God, would I have fought for that to do now? Like it's inherent to like the movie, but like in Hangover 3, we had to do this sequence where Chow jumps from the Caesar's Palace and he like parachutes down through the strip. And I was just back in Vegas the other week and I was at Paris, which is we took a 1,000-foot cable cam and hung, you know, a stuntman like, and we did a cable cam shot across between like 2 casinos with Paris in the middle. And I'm like, God, the fact that we even like said, let's do this and then did it along with like jumping parachuters with like 20 cameras along the strip and closed down the strip. I'm like, I feel like I can't even recall us fighting for that, but I'm like, that's spectacular. In those moments, I'm like, this is crazy. Like we're doing this because one, the script called for it, but then also like I in some meeting said we should do a cable cam and this is how, and then somebody said, yeah, let's do it. And I'm like, and then that shot cost some amount of money that I don't even know, but we paid for it. And I'm like, God, I can't believe we even did that, you know? Like it's bigger than shit we, you know, did since even in a way. Yeah. And it's silly and it's crazy, but it was super fun, you know? And then to like plan it, I then had to say, well, we need to jump parachuters out in Los Angeles and test them on film to see how we're even going to light them, right? And then like have parachuters jump out of a plane in the middle of Los Angeles and land in like a parking lot. And that was just a test shoot day. I was like, what did that cost?
Yeah.
You know? But so it's those things, you know, to like that when you have to ask for those things and push them through and recognize that there's a massive cost to it and stand by it and go, well, we have to do this because we need to learn, like, what are we going to do? And then just stand by that and go, this is part of the business of making this movie, you know, and stand by that. That I think becomes part of the responsibility when you grow as a DP on bigger budgets.
And like, how did you learn the skills that like equipped you for sets of that size?
That's a great question. I think you just like do it progressively, movie by movie, you know? I remember the first movie I ever did, I had no business even being hired. I had barely done anything except for that tiny movie that I made with my friend and a short film. And the director just was like, oh, I'll hire you. And it was like a $5 million movie in Fabens, Texas, which is just outside El Paso. And it was called Coyote Rain, but I think the movie ended up being called On the Border. And I remember it was like a $5 million movie, which, you know, my cousin and my camera assistant who was with me on that Captain Jack movie, they were both with me as camera assistants. And I remember when he came out, he's like, Jesus, man, all these trucks are for this and for you. And you're like in charge of all this shit. And I remember because they got me a crew there and they were all guys in their 40s and I was in my like mid to high 20s. And they looked at me like, there's no fucking way this guy's our boss. And I remember being a bit terrified and just powering through with like the knowledge that one, I was hired to do this, so it means I deserve to be here. And take some of that fear and anxiety and just put it into preparation and just take chances and do all the things you want to do. And what's the absolute worst thing that's going to happen is you fail. And then just run through the idea of like, well, what would failure really mean? Like, what's the worst thing that would happen? You get fired. That would suck. Okay, so then I've been fired. And then you go, okay, you recover from it, right? And firing gets, you know, that sucks. And, but it's not the worst thing in the world, right? The worst thing in the world would be to like to do the whole thing without taking any risks and to not push yourself. Like, that would be way worse than failure. And so I got through that movie and it was great. And then that gave me like the sort of the next movie. I was like, okay, I deserve to be here even more. And the next movie, and okay, this is how I dealt with that crew. And and then you just keep working your way up. And then every movie you figure out new ways to navigate the diplomacy and then navigate the producing and navigate all the things that have nothing to do with the creative. And you fuck up and you nearly get in a fist fight with an AD in Mexico on Club Dread, where you guys are like, you want to go? You want to go? And that's embarrassing and nobody should ever witness that. But you fucking do it and you learn, well, that's probably not the best way to do it. So you try not to do that next time, you know, and you just like learn each step of the way and you make tons of mistakes, you know. And I mean, I can think about every single movie and I think about the 5 things I learned on that movie and I take that with me to the next film, you know. I think there's no preparation in which you sort of line all those things up and then you go, I'm ready. You do it, each one, you're not ready for some part of it and then you learn it. And then the next one, you're not ready for this, but you learn it. Oh, this set's bigger than I've ever had to shoot before. All right, well, then you get through it and you're like, okay, some of those set I did well. What would I learn next time, you know? And you're not going to knock it out of the park, but you'll learn something from it for the next time you do it, you know? Mm-hmm. And you hopefully then either bring on other people that have that experience. So sometimes it'll be like, oh, I'm going to bring on a gaffer. I'm going to bring on a key grip. I'm going to bring on a camera assistant that can help get me through this, that have the experience, that I can ask them straight up, like, how the fuck are we going to light this set? Help me with this.
Yeah, for sure.
And like use their world of experience, you know. Rafi Sanchez, who I worked with on Black Adam and I did reshoots on Jungle Cruise with, he also gaffed the new Joker for me. This guy's the best gaffer in the world and was the best because I'd already shot 30 movies, but now even in my career, to be able to go through his wealth of knowledge, or Ray Garcia, who I'd never worked with as a key grip, is one of the best I've ever seen. And like having those two people, you know, it's like a wealth of knowledge. So they can take me through, you know, Walk the Line and, you know, all these Spielberg movies and all the Pirates of the Caribbean movies and massive sets. And I can go, well, how the fuck did you guys do it? And, you know, and that also gives you so much more support and all that. So you have all those people with you as well, you know?
Yeah, I agree. It's like combining the skill set of a wider team. You're unstoppable at that point.
It does. It gives you literally so much like strength and wind under your sails to feel, and that will comfort you and give you and relax you and stop the anxiety for sure.
Did you have to kind of change the way you thought about things and approach things, like to be more open-minded in a sense, or like to trust in people more?
I mean, I've struggled at times at not allowing people to collaborate as much as, you know, I like when I'm able to collaborate. Like I definitely did that even when I was directing with the DP I used. Like I would have been a shitty director for that DP to work with, right? And I realized that, but I was tight in just trying to do my same control stuff, which is to prepare. And I used to literally write out lighting plans and put every single light in place. And I'd walk the set and set every single light in place.
As a director?
No, as a DP.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. And there are other people who will be like, just let me give you the broad strokes and let me tell you the philosophy of what I want this light to be like. And then you do your thing. And that's what I started doing a little bit more of. And it's helped me infinitely, right? Because one, I'm now using all their sets of skills. It's taking some weight off of me, which has been really great. And it allows them to also like bring a whole new set of inputs and their own philosophy into like how to do it. And that's what I've started doing lately, and it's made the job so much better. Yeah, for sure. So that took some time. I didn't do it in the beginning because inherently, you know, just as a control freak. And the control came from anxiety. The control came from just not wanting to fail, you know? Like, to me, I would always say, like, the greatest motivation is just, anxiety and fear.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it'll allow me to show up on set and just be ready to go and have thought about everything backwards and forwards, because I just desperately want to make sure that, like, we succeed.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of tagging along from that, obviously you run Shotdeck.
Yeah.
And if I'm kind of gathering what your personality is like, obviously I think you're going to want Shotdeck to succeed and keep on going, and you're not going to stop. But yeah, like, I think everyone kind of in the film industry is like an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
In a sense. What was it that inspired you to create Shotdeck and kind of think outside of film, or like not directly affect film or shooting, but you wanted to make something alongside it?
A necessity, you know. It was, I one of the things I love about film and filmmakers is they're entrepreneurial and they're massive problem solvers, right? Like, we're the greatest group of individuals that come together, and everybody, I think, to a person, generally has the attitude of, like, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like improv, right? Like, the first rule of improv is you say yes and, right? So if anything's presented, if you say no, it stops the improv. Yes just continues it. So if a director says, I want to do this, the philosophy is like, yes, right? So I feel like that entrepreneurial spirit is like, we all are fighting for our jobs. We're all fighting for things. So we inherently are starting our own businesses. And so when I started realizing over time, and this came out of like decades of like, I wish there was a tool that collectively sort of grabbed all these screen grab references that I would do on my own, on my computer, but have them infinitely searchable in all these categories, and realizing it didn't exist. Yeah, there were some sites that had screen grabs, but they didn't have it in a searchable way. And over time, honestly, it was like, it just came to like a head where I was like, if I don't sit down and try to create this, like, either somebody else will or nobody will, which will be even worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just was like, well, it's now or never. And then once you started creating it, and then once we got it out to the community and realized how much they wanted it and needed it, and it was like exactly what I hoped, which was, if I need this, other people need it too. Then I was like, no, I want this to really scale and become so much more than what it is. I want it to become everything, right? So I have such plans for what Shotdeck wants to be that now, yes, it's like a new obsession of mine of like, okay, how do we get there? And how do we get it to become this like massive tool? Not just what it is now, but like what it can be in the future.
Yeah, for sure. And like, did you always have an idea that you wanted to do something else? Or did this just present itself at the right time?
This just presented itself, yeah. I mean, I was an economics major in school, so I think inherently understanding, not business so much, but understanding that like entrepreneurship is, as it's in, its core, is finding a problem that needs to be solved and then executing on that. So in that regard, it presented itself, and now I'm in that mode of like, oh, other things I'd like to solve, that don't, other parts of the industry that are like inefficient that I think would be great to like sort of help solve.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so it could come in other forms as well.
And it kind of takes it off of your person, and it's like, it's not just about you and like your art and your creative expression. It's about a wider thing.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And a bigger thing.
And something that is like servicing the industry and to be, better, right? And something I can go, well, I'm actually hoping to help the industry in a way.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
And so, yeah, how did you, what were the first kind of steps of starting Shotdeck?
Yeah. Well, the first step was 7 or 8 years of thinking about it and not doing anything with it. All right. So it's like, and going, well, how could I do this? And I'm too busy. And could I do this in Lightroom? And could I just like figure out a way to keyword
in Lightroom?
It? Yeah, like could I just take all these images and start to keyword them and figure out the architecture of it? And then I realized, well, one, I didn't have time to do that anyway, so I never did it. And then, you know, my wife now, who I call my wife, but we're not married, but I think I told her about the idea, and then I think, you know, in sort of courting her, I didn't want to feel like I was just bullshit, you know? So I was like, yeah, you know what? If like 2 years from now, I told her this story about this idea and then never executed on it, now I'm just bullshit. So in a weird way, I was like trying to impress her. I finally was like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to actually now start to put this into place. So then it was like, let me find a designer, let me find a coder, let's start building the architecture. And it went slowly because it was all on my back and on my pocketbook for like 5 years. And we just slowly built it, starting with just imagery and then figuring out like even everything from like what it should look like, but also all the categories. And we would add things over time and then opening it up to a beta. And it wasn't until really 2019 that we made it like a public beta and then realized, oh, this is something that people really would like to use. And then it was like, okay, now if we turn it into a proper business, we could scale it and then make it, you know, not just be, you know, adding 20,000, 30,000 images a year, but we could add hundreds of thousands a year, you know, and get to 1 million by this end of this year and just grow it and grow it exponentially. And so then it wasn't until 2020 that it really started feeling like, okay, we got to turn this into a business.
And right now, I guess you have a team, you've expanded.
Yeah, we've got like we got real employees, health benefits, and you know, all that stuff. Yeah, it's like it's a proper company. And then we have all these taggers, freelance taggers that tag the images and curate it and all those things. So yeah, and then we have also a bunch of plans for new tools. You know, we obviously just started music videos. We have the app that'll be ready. You know, it's ready now. It's really just a function of pushing it live, which will be in the next couple of weeks, and then just a bunch of new plans for it. Yeah.
And do you oversee all of it, or have you let some part of it go where you let other people develop new things for it and progress it?
Oh no, we've got a whole team now. Yeah, I still am like the head of it, but I'm also trying to like find somebody who can replace me a little bit too, because shooting is still how I make a living, and shooting is still what I love to do. So, you know, that's also a tricky part. It's like finding the person to replace me to help run it day to day and allow the rest of our team, which is fantastic, to just not feel like we lose a step when I'm, you know, suddenly busy, or if I want to take a couple months off, you know, with my family, which is what I'm doing now.
So yeah, I guess this one is a two-parter. Yeah, where do you see Shotdeck going in the future? But also, where do you see your growth as an individual shooting films? Where do you see that going as well?
That's a good question, yeah. Well, I mean, some Shotdeck stuff in the future is more big ideas that I won't talk about more specifically, but there's a lot of things. Like what I'd like Shotdeck to become is effectively not just a filmmaking tool, but a bit more of an entertainment portal. As well as a filmmaking tool, I want it to be almost like the landing place for the history of film, music videos, television, commercials, whatever it is, in that it's like as many layers of information about that film as possible. So not just information about all the keywords, but it could have behind the scenes shots underneath it. It could have set lighting plans underneath it. It could basically be like a landing place so the history of that film could exist right there, right? So like the visual encyclopedia of the motion of the, you know, of the motion picture image, you know,
that's quite something.
Yeah, just like a place in which, because every time, like when I would add information, and I still tag and I still break down movies, like when I'm prepping a movie, if there's something I want as a reference, because I feel like, well, that might be referential for this film, and it's not on the site, I break it down myself. Because the breaking down of the movie and actually curating the shots will fundamentally give you insight into the way that movie's made and the visual language of it, the directing style, everything in a way that like if you didn't break it down, you wouldn't really recognize. Like, you know, particularly when you're trying to find an image, you'll start to realize where the cutting pattern is. Like the cutting pattern of Denis Villeneuve on Dune. It's like every time you think the cut's about to happen, it happens like 4 frames earlier. So like you're waiting thinking, oh, this is where that moment where the actor is going to turn their head, and you wish he would hang another 4 frames, and he's always 4 frames earlier. And you're like, wow, that's really interesting. And you start to notice it when you break down the movie. So from a shot deck standpoint, what I hope to happen is that it continues to scale and grow in a way that, one, I can just be somebody who represents the movie, the site, represents it in big picture way, but the day-to-day operations, I can step aside and let this like team that I have really run it. And they're amazing. The team's fantastic. Myself as an individual, it's just always, one, I want to direct again. That's one thing I want to do, because I think my experience directing was great. The experience of releasing the movie, and it's like, you know, the part, like I was saying before, you can control the journey. The journey was great. The destination was not what I was hoping for. And I'm still trying to process that and understand why, but I'd like another opportunity to do it and learn from it and do better. And then just continue to look for opportunities to shoot for things that excite me, challenge me, and with directors that I really admire and filmmakers that I think are exciting, you know? So where those opportunities come from, I don't know. Like, I don't like to line things up while I'm making movies. I'm not one of those people that's good at that. I don't even like to think about making another movie while I'm making one. So there are a lot of people I know that just line them up back to back to back. I just was never good at that. So I'm usually somebody who, when something's over, I then take some time, and then I go into like, oh shit, I gotta start to make a living again.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite there yet, but I'll be there soon. So I'll figure out what's next there. Yeah, and just look for new challenges. You know, there was a time deliberately when I was making so many comedies that I was finally at a place in my career where I could actually take some chances to say, well, let me shift gears and look for different opportunities, right? So even something like Godzilla was me trying to sort of shift gears and look for something that I had before that not really done, like a big science fiction movie like that. And so same thing here, right? Like look for those opportunities, maybe to do more dramas and those kind of things. I like those type of films, and I just don't feel like I've gotten those opportunities. So to maybe seek those out a little bit more.
Would you do any TV series?
I love TV. I watch more TV than I watch movies now. So to me, I admire it so much. It's funny, you know, the problem with getting older and having a family, I have 3 kids, is you do become a little bit of a slave to money. Like sometimes I'll be like, God, TV would be a pay cut. And even though and that sucks because I'm like, the TV's so good. But sometimes when I'm presented it and I'm like, can I afford it?
Yeah.
And this is where it sucks, because you go, well, you never want to be in a position where your nut is so high that you can only do a certain kind of movie. And I'm trying to grapple with that because, yeah, I would love to do TV because, one, like I say, the most of the TV I watch is so exciting that, yeah, I would not be adverse to it at all. I just know like the money might come into play, and that sucks.
Yeah.
But that's more my problem because my fucking nut with all my kids and my lifestyle. And that's on me. So that's not on the movies or the TV. But that's something you have to be sort of careful of. Maybe I got to move out of LA where it's too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. But I mean, yeah, I love TV. Obviously, Succession recently.
So good.
It's incredible.
Incredible.
It's. I just love the way they shoot it. It just the doco style, almost reality TV, but it puts you there in the moment. And
I know, and it's interesting because I remember, and I love Adam McKay, and what he did with The Big Short, and then he directed the pilot of Succession and some of the sort of snap zoomy sort of things. I feel like if I was presented with that, I'd go, haven't we fucking been there, done that with that?
Yeah.
And like, and some of that they calm down on, but some of it's still present, you know? And yet it's so effective. Like the flow of that show and the way in which it's photographed, I love so much. And it really works. Like that episode that took place in the newsroom, which was like the third to last one this season, was fucking thrilling.
Incredible.
And directed by a DP.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, that guy. Yeah, it's like it's incredible. He shoots the show, but now his directing is fucking incredible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like I'd love it. So I've finished it now, but I still can't get over it. I need to go back and rewatch it. And like I obviously we've been watching Black Mirror this week.
Yeah, I watched the first 2 episodes.
It's good, but it just doesn't touch the sides, unfortunately. Like I don't know, just something about Succession. I think it's amazing. Yeah, obviously the subject matter, but the way in which it was shot was just so raw, and I love that. I just connect with it so much.
Yeah, I agree fully. Yeah, and I was a big fan of Barry. Barry's continued to grow like, as an artistic thing, right? Like in the early seasons, I feel like it was more, sort of finding its place from an artistry standpoint. But then, Bill Hader, I think, starting to direct. Again, an actor being just an incredible director, which is more and more. I feel like these actors, they really know what they're doing.
Do you feel like there's a new wave of directors and film coming out? Like, you're saying an actor was directing, a DP was directing. Do you feel like there are more risks being taken?
I feel like TV allows for that. Like the playing field allows for more risk in a weird way, right? Like you'd like to think movies can take tons of risk, but God, movies, particularly theatrical movies, have become such a hard format to like make, to get studios to make them, to get them to release. They're so expensive that it inherently sort of drives things to the middle, which is exactly the opposite of where they should want to go, right? It's like the outliers are always the ones that break out, right? And yet in terms of protecting the asset, you end up having to sort of feed all these. It needs to be 4-quadrant. It needs to be all these things. It needs to be this. And then it makes the movies more homogenized and shitty. And so it's like it runs against what the movie wants to be, is to be risky, and the studios want it to be the opposite of that. And it's like TV, because one, maybe the budgets, or there's so much TV and that's what feeds streamers and all that something like Beef, the Netflix show Beef, or I feel like can be really risky. That show is incredibly bold and like takes massive risks, and the characters are constantly like confounding the viewer and like going, just stop fucking, you both can succeed if you just stop, and they just never stop. And it's like great and really pushes the audience, and so those shows I think are way more risky than movies now, for sure, except for like indie movies, like Triangle of Sadness, or Parasite, or those kind of things, which are not, Parasite's not that indie, but nonetheless,
Well, and do you see that's where the future of film?
I feel like it needs to be there, but that's the type of movies that have gotten squeezed out of the theater, right? Is like the mid-range movie. But the mid-range movie is what really needs to drive theatrical. It's not the fucking Marvels and the DCs and the big, blockbuster movies, but that's what it's become. It's just become event movies. And event movies are awesome. Top Gun, I think the new Mission Impossible will probably be really fun. They're fun, but they can't be the only thing that we go to theaters to see. So you need those mid-range movies as well as big blockbusters. And that's the thing I fear for, is that those disappear from the theater.
And there needs to be a progression, and there needs to be risks being taken to progress things forward.
Yeah, and you need to have studios that are willing to fucking finance them and put them out, because right now they just there's no place for them, right? And so I think the filmmakers are there, like even Beau is Afraid not doing well will prevent more Beau is Afraid movies from being made, right? Ari Aster is a great filmmaker. So even if Beau is Afraid is imperfect, it's like you want Ari Aster to still be making movies for the theater.
Yeah, for sure.
And same thing with Paul Thomas Anderson, and same thing with like, you don't want there to have like, only be movies that can make $1 billion in the box office to be the movies that come out. That just is a terrible place for cinema.
Maybe moving on and rounding it up. I mentioned this earlier, but I've seen you kind of doing these types of interviews with some other channels and whatnot. Like, do you want to just kind of explain why you're being so generous with your time?
Well, no, I genuinely, I like talking about like the process of making movies. I like talking about the challenges that are making movies. And, when I started out and halfway through university, got interested in making film, like I started thinking, whoa, this is a really interesting, it's not just this thing I go to see on Friday night, right? Like, oh, it's a series. It's like a puzzle of parts that get all put together, and there's craftsmanship there. And then started realizing, well, my friends are film majors, and are they going to do this for a living? And, oh, you can do this for a living. It was even anything I ever considered. And so I wanted anything to demystify it because it felt really unattainable. And I remember early on reading like an article about Conrad Hall, like picking straws with 3 of his friends to decide what thing they were going to do when they went and made a movie. And Conrad Straw was like cinematographer. And that's how Conrad Hall, one of the best cinematographers of all time, like became a cinematographer. He pulled a straw. It's like not because he was like some genius cinematographer already. No, he just pulled a straw and they learned to become a cinematographer and did Butch and Sundance and American Beauty and, and I was like, that helped me go, well, then I could do that too. I could learn this thing, right? So for me, whenever I talk to people, I'm now 30 some years into the business. So when I think about people who are 5 years in or whatever it is I'm an example of that person who, just sort of decided I want to learn this and then figure it out and has been able to have a career in it. And so for me, I like to talk about it so that people can see that it's 100% attainable. This is not some dream that is like out of reach. It takes work and it takes perseverance and it takes like, grittiness, but it's totally doable. And so whenever there's an opportunity to talk about it, I'm glad to.
Yeah.
And so I liked the show, and I came up on my Instagram feed and I kept watching it and I kept thinking, I don't know, I'll reach out to you and see if, you want to chat. And you're like, well, we do it in person. And I'm like, well, I'm doing a holiday in Europe and we have to come through London. So it felt like a natural place to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked when I saw you followed me, and I was like, okay, cool. And stay calm. And then I thought about reaching out, but I didn't want I didn't want to put anything on you or be whatever. But then you ended up reaching out, and so I'm super grateful. Which is
genuinely was like, well, let's just chat.
Yeah.
So
and like it's wicked knowing that there are people so high up that are just open for a chat, are real people who have real stories and want to share things. Like that's, I relate to that so much. That's why I kind of started the trenches. And so it's nice to see that someone's still championing it way up there.
Well, I mean, again, we're all filmmakers, right? So whether you're a 16-year-old kid with a camera or whether you're 53 like me and, try to figure out how to retire.
Really?
No, I can't. I'm going to work till I'm 90 because I got all these kids. I'm going to be like Conrad Hall, work till the bitter end. Yeah, so like to me, like we're all doing the same thing, and we're just, And I'm excited by all the work that I see. I'm excited by your work. We're gonna get some of it up on Shotdeck, the music video side.
Sick.
And yeah, so I'm excited about just seeing all the new talent that's out there.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then what do you owe your success to?
I think just perseverance more than anything else, you know. I never really had a plan B. Like, you know, we talked about like every day shooting, I have like a plan A, B, C, D, everything. Every sort of like, well, what's the worst thing that happened? Let me plan for that. I never really thought about doing anything else, right? And so I think that helped because it allowed me to just go, well, some way, somehow I'm going to find a way to make a living in the movie business. And so that perseverance, I think, is probably more towards my success than anything.
And what does success mean to you?
Just, this is the way I make my living. And enjoying it. Like, the most important thing is, yes, it's the way I make my living, but it's never felt like a job, ever. And every single time I shoot, I'm filled with joy, and I'm lucky, and I'm grateful, you know, and it's the best job in the world. And so I'm immensely happy when I'm shooting. Even if the day is shit, I'm still happy because we're creating something. Mm-hmm. And so the job has been all joy, you know, and so that makes it easy. You know, the hard parts of the in-betweens and deciding which job and whatever the other nonsense is. But every day on set, it's why it's hard. Like, the one thing about being a director is 99% of your job is not shooting or directing. It's all the rest of it. Mm. Whereas as a DP, your job is shooting. So you're like, it's like why Ridley Scott is probably a director that I really understand, because his, like, you know, he's about shooting the movies. He's not even about editing them or even writing them or producing them. He's like, you know, like he finishes whatever, like one movie, the day after, him and his team, they go scout the next movie. He's just like a commercial director, even as a feature director. He's like, I'm just a guy who's meant to be shooting on set and directing, gathering all the material, go edit it, we'll make a movie, but I'm here to like go make stuff. And I feel like that's my personality as well. You know, it's like to be on set and to be making stuff. And so that part's joyous.
Sure. And describe the 3 traits a filmmaker would need so they can survive the industry.
Well, perseverance, as I mentioned, that would be for sure, right? And grittiness, right? You know, the ability to just kind of stick with it. Enthusiasm, because I think everybody wants somebody who genuinely, you know, is there with a sense of sort of joy in their heart, you know, and not cynicism, right? Is to be like, to get all cynicism out of your head, right? Because the world's cynical enough. And you don't want a bunch of people around who are like, oh, this fucking director sucks. And it's like, well, let's help the director be better. You know what I mean? Let's like, we're all here together. Let's make this as best as it can be, or else why else are we here, right? So perseverance and enthusiasm. And the third one, I think just take risks, right? It's something I always have to remind myself. Because no matter where you are with the constraints of time and other things like that, you might just go back to the well of what you know will work, right? I'm going to set the camera, I'm going to set the lighting up 3/4 here. It's like going to be nicely shaped and all that kind of stuff. But like, you kind of have to force yourself at every stage to like go, well, I got to push myself here or something. I got to continue to sort of grow as an artist. And take risks, look for opportunities, and not just go back to the well of how I know what will work simply because I'm at a sort of a time crunch or whatever it'll be. And so, yeah, I think those 3 things.
Wicked. Well, yeah, I think that's a good place to kind of leave it on. Did you want to mention anything about the shot deck recreation contest?
I will say that. So July 1st, which I don't know when this will be edited, but July 1st to the end of July. So is that 31 days in July? I think so.
Yeah.
Yep. So you got all the month of July. 3rd annual shot deck recreations contest. So very straightforward. You take a shot from shot deck, recreate it, right? So you could do it with an iPhone. You could do it with a really professional camera. You could do it with lighting, no lighting. Do it in your homespun way. Show the behind the scenes. Recreate that shot as best as you possibly can in whatever way you can. Any shot that's on the site. And you could win, Sony cameras, aperture lighting, Roscoe lighting, all kinds of things. Over $60,000 in prizes. Double last year, which was $30,000. Last year we had an incredible amount of entries. We have like celebrity judges and stuff like that, DPs and directors and people from all departments that'll judge the contest. There's tons of prizes. And you've got the whole month of July, so get your friends together and go recreate something. And this year we'll have a special thing. Music videos are out. Music videos now in Shot Deck, you can create your own clip. So you can see the motion of the video, choose one shot. So now a motion shot, you can recreate a motion shot. That motion shot will have a grand prize of an FX6.
Jeez.
So yeah, you could win that.
Wicked. Well, yeah. If you guys aren't on Shot Deck, definitely get on Shot Deck.
Yeah, it's like no credit card, 14-day trial. So you don't have to put anything down. Just put your email in. So you can check it out, pick a shot from there, check out the site, and see how useful.
To be honest, I think everyone that listens already is on Shot Deck. It's it's industry standard, isn't it? But yeah. Well, Larry, thanks so much for coming through and blessing us with your great personality, but also just your open-mindedness to chatting with people who are first, thinking of starting their route into the industry. So yeah, really, really appreciate that.
Toby, my absolute pleasure, man. I'm glad to now be part of the Trenches podcast. Yeah. I'm glad that I'm part of like the history of it.
Yeah, for
sure. In some small way, yeah.
Definitely. You're on the mantelpiece. Definitely, that's for sure. But Larry, thanks so much. And everyone check out Larry and his journey, and also Joker #2.
Yeah, next year, October.
Next year.
Yeah.
But thanks Larry.
Awesome. Thank you.